For my March letter from the editor, I wrote about the experience of sending my kids back to school after having had them home for a year. I wrote about that as a way to get into our package on the ways in which the pandemic will have affected our lives once the pandemic is over. And one of those big ways is in education. It's going to leave a lasting impact on a generation of kids who've spent a lot of their most important educational time at home instead of in-person schooling. The interesting thing is I actually had a draft of this letter ready to go before I actually sent my kids back to school, and that draft talked about how I missed my kids once they went back to school. Because there is something kind of charming and something really rewarding about having all that family time together. I mean, watching my 9-year-old son figure out science things and hearing him explain it to me in, wrong, but in a really, fun, delightful way. There's something that you don't get that when you're in the office all day. The beautiful day of February 1st when we sent our kids back to school in person, it took about an hour for me to just suddenly realize how my life had changed. And I went down to see my wife, who was working in her office at home, and we just looked at each other and went, oh my God. I scrapped that version of my letter and wrote an entirely different one about how wonderful it was to have my kids back in school, and how I think, as I'm sure every parent out there will understand, how I believe that is really critical to getting our lives back to normal, how getting our economy booming again. I mean, parents are just totally consumed with their kids and their kids' education right now. Yeah, teachers are the absolute heroes right now. Seeing it day by day, trying to keep kids interested through a computer is incredibly challenging, and the patience that our teachers had has been remarkable. This year, our teachers really just got it down to a science, and they did an amazing job. I still know my kids will have lost out on quite a bit. There's just a lot that you cannot learn when you're trying to do it through videos and all that, but I can't imagine them having done a better job. Honestly, the lack of social interaction was one of the main reasons we wanted to send our kids back to school. My youngest is a particularly social kid, and it was obvious. It was, I think of it like when you read about elephants, and you have elephants, in captivity, and they are just miserable because they're social animals, and they need a lot of activity. They need interaction, and that was my son, my youngest son. He just desperately needed to be around other kids. The experience of virtual education has been very different for some families versus other families. Families like mine, where my wife and I both are able to work from home most of the time, and we do have some help with childcare. Even we struggled with keeping kids on track, making sure they were getting what they needed out of education. Think about families they're a single parent, or they have to leave the home for work, and they don't have childcare, and they can't afford it. How in the world did they manage this? And Dr. Vitti, the superintendent of Detroit Public Schools, talks about it in the piece, that he of all people should be best positioned to handle this at home, and yet they struggled. Another topic I explore in my letter this month is our cover story, which is our first ever naming of a Restaurateur of the Year, which was Maxcel Hardy. March is usually one of our most read issues. It's our annual Restaurant of the Year, and really was no way we could judge a restaurant on the usual things that we judge a restaurant on. But restaurateurs like Max have been super busy, and as many people have recognized, few as busy as Maxcel Hardy. So we were really thrilled to name him as our first Restaurateur of the Year. I hope you will pick up the issue of the magazine and read my letter, but more importantly, read our cover story on Max and our piece on how the pandemic will have changed our lives once it is finally over.